Freedom Mirror is a community for entrepreneurs and business owners that gives you the tools and the system to create a new revenue stream online through high commission sales with automation and huge passive potential. With TFE, you can forget about small margins and small commissions and learn how to make 5 figures in 7 sales or less. To find out how to set up your freedom business, check out the free training at brendandmurphy.com/income. All right, hello and welcome to this episode of Truthiverse. This week I'm joined by my fellow truth seeker and, well, he's a pioneer in the field of sound healing and DNA activation, also a pioneering artist, very well recognized, internationally respected artist, Sol Luckman. Sol, good to have you here, mate.
Thanks for having me, Brendan. It's nice to catch up a little bit. We were catching up before we came on air.
Yeah, it is. It's good to. We don't get to do it a lot, but this is a good chance, and it'll be a slightly longer version of a catch up, which is good. And you've just published a book which is about the fallen goddess, and so apparently this is really catching on, and we're going to talk about that and dig into it. So Sol, which I should have mentioned, was also a very respected author and writer, and he's got several books out there which I recommend, including Conscious Healing and Potentiate Your DNA. And so this latest one is about the fallen goddess. Let's dig into that. So where would you like to start? Maybe, I mean, how did you end up writing about this in the first place?
Well, I'll be happy to speak to that. I wanted to say the book is actually not published yet. It's going to be officially released on Sunday or the 20th in our hemisphere. So that's the solstice, and I thought if you're going to write a book on the goddess, you need to release it either on the solstice or the equinox. There's just no ifs, ands, and buts about it.
Yeah, okay. Fitting, very fitting. All right. So it's not quite released yet. It's about to be released.
Right. So people have been reading galley copies and excerpts and listening to interviews about it. I've given a huge number of interviews. I just interviewed with Chef Pete last week, and he's going to be putting that up in the next day or two. That was really fun. And awesome. Michael Jaco and I had a great conversation. Mark Atwood, Nicholas Vinyaman. It's been great. I mean, the interest has been very encouraging, and the just the comments that I've gotten from the interviews and from people reading the excerpts and dipping their toes in this concept, I realized that there's some energy in this, and it's pretty darn exciting.
For sure. So tell us about what's the thrust of the book, and we'll dig into like the nitty gritty of it. But yeah, give us the broad strokes of it.
All right. So the backstory is that it came to me in a very strange way in late 2019. I've told this story a number of times, so if you've heard this before, forgive me, but I went to bed one night, and I remember being kind of tired. I wanted to get some sleep, and instead of sleeping, I felt like I was plugged into an electrical socket, and I began just downloading this entire novel plot. And it was about, of all insanely timed things, a viral pandemic resulting in mass vaccination, which I call vaccination in the novel, giving way to mass illness and death, and ultimately a kind of dystopian future. And that all came through to me in 2019 before COVID even broke in the West.
Wow. Okay.
So that I was working on this book as the scamdemic happened, and literally responding to it in real time or observing it in real time. I already had the plot. Yeah. I was literally writing it as it happened.
Wow.
And so complete with, the same kind of, vaccine-induced genocide, vaccine-induced genocide we're seeing, all of it. And I do have a witness that this was the case. Lee, my partner, whom you know, I told her the whole story the following day as we had a bike ride. She was amazed. She was kind of flabbergasted that all of this came through in one night. And she knew me, and I began writing it, and stayed pretty faithful to that. It was a different writing experience for me. I've over the years, I've gotten a little more relaxed in where and how I can write, I'm very noise sensitive, so it was really odd that I could write this one sort of in the melee of the kitchen table with a homeschooling son and business going on and everything in the world happening. So I just came streaming out. It was the most effortless thing, and it didn't even take that long to write a chapter. And then I would read it to Lee very often, right then and there, or later. And she was like, "Oh my God, that's incredible! It just keeps coming out of you. I can't believe it." So that was an interesting experience. Just how it came through, and then the actual experience of writing it. It took me in the neighborhood of a year to finish it. And I've said before that I believe that Kali the Destroyer, and that's Kali with a C, by the way, not a K. Kali the Destroyer has the potential to come to be regarded as a historically significant novel, and that's not because I wrote it or even because of its literary quality, which nevertheless I think is pretty good, but it highlights a little known yet extremely important fact, and that's that its primary subject involves the single most censored story in the history of humanity.
And obviously, we have to go, well, what's this most censored story?
Right. So I was just pausing, give me a little, throw me a
Metaphors.
bone, Brendan. That is the Gnostic telling of what I contend could very well be the true nature and origins of the earth and humanity. According to John Lamb Lash, who wrote a wonderful book several years ago called Not in His Image, he first retold this story in the modern era, this narrative, the fallen goddess scenario is what he calls it. Mm-hmm. And he claims that this is the real reason for the holy wars, the inquisitions against pagans and goddess worshiping and shamanic peoples everywhere, that has resulted in, a genocide count. If you look over the years, a genocide count that's probably in the high millions. Mm. Right. So this was the most, not just censored, but the most dangerous story to even know anything about.
Definitely. Yep. 100%.
And it also seems to be, I would offer, it may very well be the real reason that genocide, the vaccine assisted variety, is still happening right now with what's going on here with what I call Operation Warped Speed.
Yep.
Right. And this whole goddess thing is, I call it a rabbit hole full of rabbit holes. And what it does is it singles out, I'm gonna contend, it singles out the source of evil as we experience it. There's a whole, subdivision of theology called ponerology, which is the study of evil. And to me, the fallen goddess scenario tells what I would consider a plausible story for what evil actually is on Earth.
Okay.
And who our real enemies are. Who are the puppet masters manipulating the strings of monarchies and governments and corporations and religions and armies in order to coordinate this multi-generational, multi-millennial, inhuman agenda to subjugate and eventually destroy us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess you're leading into the Archontic discussion.
Absolutely. I mean, we say things like deep state or new world order, cabal, Illuminati, and people sling these words around, and most of the time they don't even know really what they mean anymore. They've gotten to be almost just watered down terms, but they do point at who the controllers are, even if these are shadowy people, the deep state, the invisible enemy, whatever you want to call it. Mm. But to these ancient Gnostic people, some of whose texts were rediscovered in the 1940s in a cave, it was a kind of cave in Nag Hammadi, Egypt. The Gnostics' teachings were so threatening to the early Catholic Church, and I would say presumably true for that reason. They were systematically destroyed until they were basically erased from our collective memory. But for the Gnostics, the ultimate powers behind the terrestrial tyrants that we might be able to identify are called Archons. Now, a lot of people have probably heard of that term, and there's a lot of disagreement over what it means, because it can mean just leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or a government official, or that kind of thing. But I would point out that government itself means something to govern the mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
According to John Lash, the Archons are the ultimate mind parasites. They're these extraterrestrial beings, entities, that have the ability to enter the human mind and essentially infect it to the extent that people become archontified. And then they go about fulfilling the agenda of the Archons, which is anti-human and transhuman in the extreme. So when we look at the leaders that have been, the so-called leaders that have been flushed out of their comfort zone and forced to reveal their true nature in this whole thing that we've been living through for the last year and a half, I would say those are archontified people. Because I don't even think they're people anymore, to be totally honest. Not in any meaningful sense.
No, that's right. Not in the sense of, a human who's connected to their heart and their intelligence and intuition.
Right. And that's what really, means something. They're basically transmogrified, transhumanized tools of an extraterrestrial binary intelligence.
Mm-hmm. But when you say an extraterrestrial binary intelligence, can you flesh that out a bit for us?
Yeah, sure. This is a quote I read recently. It's from the book. So give you a little sneak peek of the book. The main character is Callie, and the plot takes place. The story takes place in a futuristic dystopian society that happens if we don't correct what's going on right now. That's the whole concept. Callie is a teenager. She's 15, turning 16. She's a huge pop star in this world that's sort of a Hunger Games-esque society. Throw in some Handmaid's Tale and maybe some other dystopian, Fahrenheit this and, Brave New World that, and you end up with this world that I've created. And Callie's having a conversation with someone whose name will have to remain. She'll have to remain anonymous because that would give too much away. But I'm going to read this little conversation between the two. Okay. So, so this person that she's speaking to says that the Illuminati are the willing. No, all right. The Illuminati are the willing terrestrial servants of the Lord Archon, who demands everything from pedophilia and child sacrifice to war and chaos as offerings that create loosh. And then Callie says, never heard of it. Loosh is a hyperdimensional energy given off by the human soul when traumatized. The Archons parasitically feed on it. Think of it as their simulacrum of Kundalini. Why is seemingly everything the Archons do counterfeit? Because they lack the capacity to create anything truly original. In their insane jealousy, they can only mimic the divinely instilled creative capacity of the anthropos, which is the Gnostic term for the human race, basically. So are the Illuminati still technically even human? That is a probing question. If the definition of a human is a child of the goddess, in possession of an immortal soul and the ability to invent, the answer would most certainly be no. And then I'm going to skip down. And Callie asks, don't the Illuminati realize they're just pawns in someone else's game? Even if they realize this, I will wager they are beyond caring. They have been completely integrated into the AI, the artificial intelligence. This is another term for the archontic hive mind. It is a binary operating system that imitates the many shades of gray characteristic of human intelligence, only to end up a circumscribed parody of it that processes everything strictly in terms of black and white. Good versus evil, man versus woman, rich versus poor, east versus west, liberal versus conservative, take your pick. Anytime you see dichotomies that ignore the human experiment's infinite nuances, you can be certain you are encountering the archontic mind.
I like that. I love it, actually. And the last thought that came to me there was speaking of that black and white worldview that the character is referring to, was that is exactly how any fundamentalist of any religious persuasion, but particularly the Catholics and the Christians that I encounter, even today, right now in the truth movement, they have that very black and white binary Manichaean kind of worldview. They think that if you don't believe exactly what they believe and see reality the way they see it, that you're in league with the devil, kind of thing.
Right. Or yes, or you're just trying to divide the movement or whatever.
Yeah, because it's all black and white, right?
Yep. So you've got some scholars, they've been unable to really try on the implications of this idea that John Lash forwarded, that the Archons are actually these extraterrestrials, and it's there in the Gnostic writings. He's not making this up. He is reading into some things a little bit, but he's not just creating out of thin air. This is a viable interpretation of these texts, that there are these extraterrestrial mind parasites that control humanity. But then some more mainstream, more 3D, more left brain, whatever you want to call it, maybe more fundamentalist in some ways, interpreters have had a really hard time. And then Gnosticism has been co-opted by Christianity as if it were some kind of early Christian sect, when in fact the Gnostics were massive critics of the early Christians.
Yeah.
So Lash really, in my interpretation, leaves little room for doubt that by Archons, the Gnostics meant an extraterrestrial race of essentially immortal thought parasites who over the many centuries have controlled our leaders, their terrestrial proxies, through a type of mind control that operates through reality simulation. And if you think about that with what's going on now, when we can't even tell if something is a deep fake, we can't even tell in this country whether we have an actual person in the role of our quote unquote president. It's not even clear if it's an actual human being or a CGI or a series of actors in masks. It's not clear. And if that's not Archontic, nothing is. So it would seem that we are in the apex of the Archon's ability to create a simulated reality.
Yeah.
Baudrillard was a philosopher. He is a philosopher. I think he's still around. And he wrote about simulacra, simulation. He compared the whole world to basically like Disneyland. America in particular was like Disneyland. And that has become even more true today than it was, decades ago when he wrote that. There's a scene in The Matrix when Neo is looking for a pirated disc that he's made for folks have come to him. Well, he's made it for, I forget the character's name, but it's something he's made that's illegal. And he opens up Baudrillard's book on simulacra, which is hollow. It's not really a book, it's a hiding place. And he takes the disc and he gives it to the person.
How's that for symbolism?
It's great. It's just perfect. But so basically it means that we live in falsehood, inside lies, inside untruths, and it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. It's many layered. It's like an onion.
So true. And that's one of the hardest things to convey to people, even a lot of people who are in the truth movement and have been for a while, is that, for example, like the scamdemic, you've got to drill down through all these layers of modern mythology, like modern medical myth, all these layers of illusion to get to the bottom, the foundation of, for example, virology, which turns out to be just complete and utter bullshit and like the worst possible junk science you could ever imagine. But that's like one example of just how layered it's become. It's not just a scamdemic because, PCR tests are unreliable. It's the whole thing. Every level and layer of it is just rubbish.
Well, it's so true. I wrote an article on my blog at snooze2awaken.com, and I was introduced. I've written many articles on this subject during this whole scandemic, but basically my conclusion was that at this point, with all the information that we have from Dr. Kaufman and Dr. Cowan and other people, Stefan Lanka, that anyone spreading this narrative that a contagious virus called SARS-CoV-2 occurred either naturally or was engineered in a Wuhan lab is guilty of perpetuating humanity's enslavement to a scientific absurdity.
Yeah, 100%.
So, it's just absolutely amazing. But that again is absolutely archontic. But there's just no middle ground. Either you can see through that, or you can be Mike Adams or Del Bigtree and you cling to the scientific fiction. I call these people half-truthers. They're not even truthers, they're half-truthers.
Yeah. Okay, I love it. So going back to your narrative and the Archons, I mean, let's pick up that thread again. So Lash did an amazing job, by the way, as you've been saying, of bringing this out and interpreting and reinterpreting. And he's continued to do it since then, because that book came out, and I think it was 2006. And
right. And he's gone in some directions that I'm not very comfortable with, and I have a kind of acknowledgement / disclaimer at the back of my book. So we could perhaps talk about some of those things, but I would rather focus on the good here and what he contributed that I think was rational and helpful before things kind of went off the rails a little bit.
Yeah.
So going back to the story, the ultimate target of the Archons, it would seem, is not so much humanity. We're kind of what stands in the way of their revenge on their mother who abandoned them, essentially. And we're also the Archons half or brothers and sisters. They're our older siblings, which is very, very strange, because the goddess, the literal goddess Sophia, who created the human species in galactic center, she's this figure called an Aeon. She created the human strain, the Anthropos, with her partner Thelete, and then through either on purpose or by accident, she fell out of galactic center and went spinning through space, and in her panic, inadvertently, using kind of her shadow side as she was panicking, she created the Archons. And so they appeared in our solar system first before we did. Even though we had been designed earlier, our genetics had been designed earlier. So we are actually talking about Mother Earth. This is the fallen goddess, the one that the Catholics demonized in Fallen Women, from Eve to Mary Magdalene, out of what I would contend is a kind of sick desire to separate the archontically hypnotized masses from their genuine power source in the sacred feminine. So what I did was I took Lash's very, very somewhat dry academic exposition of the fallen goddess scenario. I did take many, many creative and interpretive liberties with it, but I recast it as a fast-paced work of fiction in which the goddess and her consort, Thelete, are actually characters.
And so Kali, with the C, is the goddess in your novel, but who is? Are you keeping the name of her consort on the down low at the moment?
Well, let me read you the description from the back cover. It's very, very brief, and this will give you a little more context for the nature of the story. So this is the description: best friends, check. Illegal lovers, check. Mythological entities, check. Callie and Juice aren't discovering love. They're discovering they've always been in love since the dawn of creation. In this page turner of a sci-fi tale set in an Orwellian future seated in the dystopian present, resistance to the Archons appears futile. That is, until the goddess and her consort spectacularly reappear straight out of ancient Gnosticism to take on the control matrix of the fatherland. Will the luminous child awaken in humanity before it's too late?
Okay, I am. You've got my attention. It sounds even just the back cover is riveting.
Well, I appreciate that. My son is in the process of making a trailer for it using that text, and he was showing me what he was working on today, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. It's very interesting. I was very impressed. He had kept it all on the down low and wasn't sharing anything with me, but then he did share about the first half of it today, and it was like, okay, keep going. I hope this ends up being as good as the second half ends up being as good as the first half.
It's always nice when your offspring are technologically adept.
Oh, much more so than myself. I'm a Luddite.
Yeah, I can put my hand up there.
So another thing that would be worth sharing would be the epigraph and the context for that a little bit, because the epigraph is really what in many ways defined the entire story. It was my touchstone over and over again, and it's so profound and multi-layered, even though it's short, that I continue to learn from it. It's taken from one of the Gnostic texts known as On the Origin of the World, and in this quote, which really is a absolutely perfect description of this current historical moment right now, the one that we're in right now on this prison planet. Sophia gives the following prophecy to the Lord Archon, who's also called the Demiurge. Now he thinks he's a god. He thinks he is God and that he created everything that he sees, but he's actually blind, as in sightless. And he's basically this overweening windbag with very little power, real power outside of his ability to trick the human mind. So this is what Sophia says to him before she finishes becoming the planet. Mm-hmm. All right. So this is such a cosmic, epic moment in this history. She says, "You are mistaken, blind one. There is an immortal child of light who came into this realm before you and who will appear among your duplicate forms in your simulated world. And in the consummation of all your works, their entire deficiency of truth will be revealed and dissolved by this luminous child."
Love it.
So one of the main themes of the book is the luminous child and defining what that is, and also defining that in relation to the notion of the destroyer, Kali the destroyer, and defining, or at least proposing, a concept, theory for where we go from here, how we actually overcome the archontic enslavement that we're facing, the twin pillars of their agenda, which is domination and depopulation.
Yeah. I don't think the depopulation
that's specifically mentioned in the book as their twin goals.
It's quite clear that is, I mean, it's never been as obvious as it is now. It's very obvious.
Yep.
So, I mean, without spoiling what's in the book, can you touch on your strategy? Can you touch on, can we talk about the luminous child, the solutions, this kind of thing?
Yeah, let's do that. And let's do it with reference to the epigraph, because it's all in there. It's just amazing. So she's calling the Lord Archon out as being blind and mistaken. And actually his name, I believe it's in Aramaic, is Saklas, which means fool, sort of like blind fool, right? So you are mistaken, blind one. There is an immortal child of light. So first of all, an immortal one. It's not just a mortal being that we're talking about. There's some kind of immortal child of light. And either that's through generation via progeny, immortal in that way, or in some other way. But in any case, I like the word immortal in there, and it suggests that humanity survives. There is an immortal child of light who came into this realm. So we designed this, in the pleroma before you were even here, and who will appear among your duplicate forms in your simulated world. And this is how I interpret it: will appear among your archontified humans in your fake reality. And in the consummation of all your works, so when you think that you are going to succeed with your domination and depopulation agenda through the enslavement of these people's minds on a mass scale, their entire deficiency of truth will be two things: revealed and then dissolved by this luminous child. So I read this as a kind of playbook for what's going on right now because of the way it came through to me.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of inspired. I've said in another interview that I kind of feel like the goddess gave me this book, and
Mm-hmm.
sue me if you disagree with me or you think I'm being blasphemous. But in any case, there it is. So if you look at this revealed and dissolved by this luminous child, we are in the revelation phase. This is all the light that's being shined on their corruption, their deceit, their lies, their agendas. We haven't even gotten to the dissolution phase.
No.
Now, in terms of what the luminous child is, great question. I provide one possibility in this novel, and it's a very interesting one. But even if the luminous child is simply an awakened humanity coming together, that is very powerful.
Absolutely. 100%. That's kind of how I've had it in my mind, something along those lines. A conscious awakened humanity is the divine child, the offspring of the eons in the pleroma, such as Sophia.
Absolutely. And yet there was some level of excitement, even in this reading that Lash has given to the Gnostic story. This is not the human species broadly defined, the broadly defined human species. This is not our first rodeo. We've been on many other planets, versions of our experiment. But they did something different with this one by putting the luminous child in it. So there's something special about the luminous child, and it suggests to me that it's not just an intellect. We're not just discussing an intellectual awakening or even a heart awakening. We're discussing some kind of mutation of the species into something greater that is immortal.
Which is what a lot of people, there's been a lot of sort of prophecy interpretation and conjecture around that. People like David Wilcock are always pushing this kind of narrative, and like we are evolving. You've written about it, I've written about it. I've got a chapter on it in my book, and I'm still working on my second one, which is sort of pushing in that direction. I think there may be something to it. Either it's a really intense sort of psychically gripping idea that we can't seem to get past or let go of, or maybe there's something really in there to it. And I kind of feel like there is a seed of truth in there, that there is a mutation or a transformation of the human species going on, as much as it's being devolving and destroyed and what have you.
Right. In Conscious Healing, the first book I wrote on regenetics, this method of sound healing that you and I are familiar with, I quote a biochemist, Colm Kellerer is his name,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks about the transposition burst and how there is a plausible genetic phenomenon where you could see genes rearranging in the thousands, and it would be enough to actually transmute a biological creature in real time into something else, and he actually, even as a scientist, he theorizes this might be the mechanism that explains various claims of light body activation and that kind of thing in various places in the world. That's interesting. Do we have hard evidence of that phenomenon? No, but we do have a lot of information that it's plausible, and we have a lot of stories, both ancient and modern, to suggest that it may be real.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So the luminous child leaves a lot of room for conjecture, interesting conjecture and speculation.
Yeah. I definitely wrote the book to open up discussion, open up thinking, not to solve all of these problems or answer all of these questions, because I don't pretend to have all of the answers. But I think if you look at the Gnostic texts and you read what they're actually saying, and then you compare it to what's going on in the world today, and you allow yourself to see how this explanation of reality actually does explain evil and what we're up against. I mean, there's a lot of boxes that it checks, much more so than something like Revelation, which, people are always pointing to the book of Revelation as if it says anything.
Yeah.
But it's just gobbledygook in my estimation.
Well, they project that what they want to see into it. So
right. But but it's got so many different interpretations, whereas you can say simulated world, your duplicate forms and everything, and look at that in relation to the story of the Archons and the goddess, and it actually lines up.
Yeah, that's right. So did you I wanted to touch on the lash thing, but maybe we're not quite there yet, where he's taken things that maybe you don't necessarily feel like it's sort of on point, but let's flesh out whatever else you need to flesh out as far as your take on the narrative, and we also, you mentioned the language of the birds as well was something we were going to talk about, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. Well, that's a major theme in the book.
Okay, tell us about that. What is the language of the birds? How does it fit into the book? Let's drill into that.
Right. Well, I wrote about the language of the birds in both of my books on regenetics, and much more so in Conscious Healing than in Potentiate Your DNA, but I do mention it in Potentiate Your DNA. And I propose that the sounds, these vowels that we're using when we activate people's DNA, are a modern day application of an ancient sacred language based in vowels only, called the language of the birds. I also loved King Carey's work on the bird tribes. So I brought the bird tribes with the language of the birds into Kali the Destroyer, and made that part of this reality that I'm building out.
Okay. So, and I have read Ken Carey's book, so I know what you're referring to. Let's talk a bit more about the vowel sounds, and what's your take on this? Let's really go in there, because I'm interested in this. I mean, it's a long running subject, and we hear I've heard people talk about the language of the birds over years now, and everyone seems to have their own idea of what that means, and a lot of it seems to be quite nebulous and vague. So if we can make it less nebulous, I'm definitely interested in that.
Sure. Let me pull up a document, if you don't mind.
Please do.
Well, I don't have to. I can do this from memory. The person whose work I like on the language of the birds, who wrote about this, is William Henry.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, he does a good bit on this topic, and so I would challenge anybody to do as much research as Henry and come up with information on the language of the birds. People are always going to have their opinions, but he does a lot of work in his books. So you can look up, I forget which books this topic is most prevalent in, but he touches on it in multiple books. And It's this ancient language. Again, it's all vowels, and the vowels are being used to heal, to raise consciousness, to evolve the not only the mind and the spirit, but perhaps the body. He theorizes that it was used by ancient masters that are recorded in our major religious texts, for example. So for him, it has a very long and illustrious history, but it's like so many things that's been suppressed. I mean, wouldn't you just like to take a tootle through the Vatican Library and see what all they stole from the library at Alexandria, and read all about the language of the birds one of these days?
That's right. Yeah, it'd be amazing.
Yeah. So not having that, those of us who are interested in this kind of thing have often had to sort of go into a right brain meditative space. I hesitate to call it channeling. I really hate that word. But and bring this stuff through kind of out of the ethers. There is a morphic field. Sheldrake has written about this. There's all this information out there in the morphic field. And if you want to call it the Akashic record, that's fine too. But I think that's a little problematic. Anyway, so that's what happened with me when I got really sick, as you know, from vaccination. You know, I was an early canary in the coal mine, and I got really, really sick. And when I went down this shamanic path and had all of these metaphysical, esoteric, spiritual experiences, it culminated in bringing through these vows that we applied to this healing methodology that made me well when nothing else had. And I had tried everything under the sun practically at that time.
Yeah.
So to me, the proof is that it works. It's really powerful, and it's much more powerful than anything else I've ever encountered in terms of energy healing.
Yeah. I can say the same thing as someone who's done it and received it, and also as a practitioner as well. It's definitely unique for sure.
So what I thought would be really fun is to fictionalize the language of the birds as a sacred language being spoken by people who are still in connection with the goddess, and to map it back towards that, because the goddess, even in the Gnostic text, is described as the. Henry does a lot of good work on this too, although he talks about 7 vowels in connection with the language of the birds. But my contention has been that English is the distillation of all of these vowels. I think there's something like 22 vowels in Hebrew, for example, micro vowels. But in English, it all shows up, and you can sing them in a certain way. And when you go from one vowel to another, if you go you're getting all those micro vowels.
Yeah.
So all you got to do is sing the vowels, and you get all the ancient micro vowels. That's my term. I'm not sure if that's an actual linguistic term. So if you're a PhD out there, forgive me. But so that is the language of the birds, and it has to be the right vowels sung in the right way and at the right frequency for maximum results. So this goes into all of my nonfiction work, as you well know. But it was really fun to write about it as if it were that ancient language still in use somewhere in Kali the Destroyer, and also explore how powerful that is in different applications beyond what I've developed, for example.
For sure. It just occurred to me, I mean, we've had in the sort of, I don't know, new age community, if you want to call it that, maybe that's not a good term, but there's this language of this light language that people talk about. And I'm wondering if there might be some sort of, can we draw a long bow? Is there a connection there, do you think? Have you heard of this phenomenon?
Yeah, I thought maybe that's what they're referring to, though very few people actually end up retracing that concept back to sound. And fewer people still actually talk about vowels as being part of that. So I think maybe some people are thinking that, and maybe a lot of people are sensing the language of the birds in some ways, and they may be calling it the language of light or the light language without really knowing what they're talking about.
Yeah. Interesting.
You had Ken Carey in one of his books, talking about this, something like this language in the future, when people would literally just sing songs. He called them songs of distinction, and we have songs of distinction that we sing in Regenetics that's an homage to Carey. But he talked about how in the future people would be able to sing a song to someone's ailing liver, for example, and have it just regenerate its cells.
I mean, that sounds awfully shamanic.
Yep, absolutely. And he's the one writing about the bird tribes and all of that. So, there are many deep roots in all of this material. I mean, Kali in some ways is the culmination of a lot of my research over the years, and the amalgamation of that.
Well, it sounds like people are really going to enjoy it. At the very least, it sounds like it's a very, very compelling and possibly exciting read. I'd love to say that I could just pull up a copy of your book and sit on the couch for a few hours, but that won't be happening anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think so. Not. I mean, I don't want to say too many things about your personal life, but you're a busy man at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what it's like. But Yeah, the Ken Carey material was a highly, in some quarters anyway, very highly respected channeled work. Some people thought extremely highly of it.
Absolutely. Although he also hated the word channeling.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's hard to say what it is if that's not channeling, then what is? I mean, it's very, very difficult.
Mm.
So I think sometimes people have experiences that they subjectively feel one way about, and they just feel that the language is not adequate to describe it.
Yeah.
For example, this whole thing that happened with Lee and myself when we were in Brazil, and these lights shined on us, and we got these codes that started coming through, these vowel codes, language of the birds, all of that. I never really thought about that as a contactee experience until Greg Carlwood interviewed me a couple years ago on the Higher Side Chats and described me as a contactee. And I thought, well, okay, I can see why you would say that. That's not really how I interpreted that, and I'm not really that comfortable with that. But sure, let's go with it.
Well, I mean, yeah, that opens up the discussion on those kinds of anomalous experiences and what they are, which we never really end up with a firm answer as to what they are, because you can interpret them through so many different lenses.
Right.
And that's just what we do, but that seems to be all we can do. It's like, what is the ultimate nature of that experience? I mean, I don't know, other than obviously you were given a lot of information, and where exactly or what exactly that came from, I don't have the answer, but
Right.
I can definitely see how you could say, like, if you have a broader, I don't know, look at or take on the contact phenomenon, as a sort of, if you like, an interdimensional or transdimensional kind of a phenomenon, then you could kind of, I guess, interpret what happened with you as one of those things. Like, you see medieval artworks with UFOs in them, and it beaming light down into a woman's belly, kind of thing. It's like, well, this is,
yeah. What do you do with that?
What do you do? There's something very, very strange experiences have persisted throughout the centuries and the millennia, and we don't know exactly how to necessarily talk about them. But yeah, contact is kind of, in a way, makes sense.
Well, the whole field of ufology is very problematized by the Archontic narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you accept that the Archons are these incredibly wily thought parasites that paint these fake narratives, then we cannot accept as being absolutely true anything we hear about ETs.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that ETs don't exist, and we're talking about ETs here, but I'm saying if the Archons control this solar system, and there's reason to believe that the Archons are at least somewhat higher dimensional, then they're not going to let a bunch of ETs just parade in and out of here very easily. You would have to have probably very high level ETs showing up who could get through their radar. So a lot of things you hear about secret space programs and people jetting all around to these other planets and everything in the world, I don't buy a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. I used to be more open to that, but as time has gone by and listening to David Wilcock and Corey Good, I'm kind of on the outside looking in now.
Yeah. Well, we all are. Unless we're one of the people who are, on the inside, we're all on the outside looking and trying to figure out what.
Well, that's true, but who are these insiders? And are they just archontified people, or have they been fed information from archontified people, and it's just all a bunch of lies?
Yeah. Well, one of the problems we have is just the tendency for humans to get muddled and confused and to engage in really distorted thinking. And then even if you are an insider, if you're functioning through those distortions, that's a problem.
Absolutely. I mean, the only thing that should be muddled is a good cocktail.
Oh, yes. I haven't had one of them for a while.
I'm writing a cocktail book.
For real?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I've become an amateur mixologist.
Okay. Things you do with your free time.
Call it downtime.
Sol Luckman, man of leisure.
Man of leisure, international man of mystery and leisure.
Okay, you got me by surprise with that. I wasn't expecting that.
Well, it's just part of my alchemical personality.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Well, where do you want to? Where do you want to go with the? Where do you want to take the discussion at this point? Is there anyone in particular?
Well, I don't know. Do you have any other questions, or did you have any notions about that? I've said a lot, in a short period of time. Certainly given people a lot of food for thought. So
Yeah. You did touch on directions that Lash went that you weren't necessarily comfortable with.
well, I don't want to be overly critical of someone to whom I'm very indebted. That's I don't want to. What is it? Look the gift horse in the mouth, or kick the gift horse in the mouth. So I will say he ended up doing something like this war party, for example,
War
that
party.
was the Calico War Party.
Oh, okay. Okay, I don't know about that.
Yeah, and essentially he was just calling for people to engage in vandalism against the deep state and that kind of thing, and all manner of things. And I just didn't feel that there was a single thing enlightened about that strategy whatsoever, and it really made me question his state of mind, frankly.
Yeah. Okay.
So you know and maybe that was a temporary thing. I haven't really looked into what he's doing with that in a very long time, and I'm also aware that brilliant people can have quirks and that kind of thing. So I'm not trying to be very too judgmental there, but that really crossed a line for me that I wasn't comfortable with.
Okay. So it's not so much about the actual the research that he's done or doing.
Oh yeah, there's many things I disagree with, even with all of that, or not, disagree maybe. Like he has certain interpretations of DNA and what it is and what it does and what the nature of a bioenergy and that kind of thing that I don't agree with. He's also, a kind of strident anti-salvationalist, and yet he talks about humanity kind of anthropos 2.0 and that kind of thing. So the idea that humanity could evolve into another version of itself is there, and yet anybody else talking about it, like the light body or anything like that, is just a monotheistically blindfolded lost person.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sort of
Okay.
like.
So there's lots of contradictions if you listen to him, even though he's also really brilliant and not in his image. I think everybody should read. I mean, I think it should just be required reading. It's that brilliant and that important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really actually I found one of them. I mean, there's a lot about that book that's amazing and super, super useful. But the point that he makes and drives home about Gnosticism not being an offshoot of early Christianity that actually preceded it is actually extremely important, because that is a whole perspective shift and flipping the narrative completely. And he's probably right. I mean, when you look at the way that history has been hijacked by the church and rewritten in their image, so to speak. Of course, they're going to turn the narrative, invert the truth. They'll turn it on its head, which is the world we live in, the world of inversion. So
exactly, that is the Archontic mind at work. Those inversions are a function of the Archontic mind, or an evidence and a function.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, there's a lot of good value as far as that goes as well.
Because so you have these Gnostics who were these goddess worshiping peoples who had been communing with the goddess, according to Lash, for thousands and thousands of years, and they were there when these early monotheistic religions appeared, and they went, "Uh-oh, that's the Archons infiltrating the human mind." And they tried to warn these early church fathers about this, and they were called Gnostics, which means know-it-all. It wasn't, it wasn't like a nice term or anything like that, and that stuck because the victors always tell the stories, write the histories, of course. So they were their suggestions were categorically denied and belittled, And eventually, when Gnosticism resurfaced somewhat miraculously in the 20th century through the recovery of these ancient text fragments, and unfortunately, we are just talking about text fragments. I'm trying to think where I was going with that. It was a good point. I was going to make a good point. Yeah, you had people like Elaine Pagels putting out the Gnostic Gospels as if these were early Christian writings. It just did a tremendous disservice to what Gnosticism actually was and could be. And then you have all of these people now going around calling themselves Gnostic Christians,
Yeah.
which is an absolute oxymoron.
I mean, when you realize that the Gnostics, from what we've, the information we have, they were extremely critical of the early Christian dogma and the irrational, bizarre, sort of mutant nature of it. To then call yourself a Gnostic Christian, you couldn't get a better or bigger contradiction in terms.
Yeah, and that's a perfectly archontic phrase. It has qualities of inversion and senselessness, while appearing to say something. I mean, that's politician speak in some ways.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm a Gnostic Christian.
That's right. Yeah. And meanwhile, you say, "Oh, I'm a Gnostic Christian," and then you kill off all the Gnostics while you.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, Lash was the one who brought all that out into the open, very, very importantly, and sort of contextualized what's been going on with this mass genocide campaign dating back a very long time, and all the crusades and everything else that we've witnessed. So to me, to put all of that into a kind of spectrum as part of an agenda that's being carried out by some other type of mind that's not just a human mind, that makes all the sense in the world to me. I've said a number of times that this idea that this secretive group of human beings has over the centuries managed to carry out this nefarious agenda, blah, 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 is insane if you've ever just played the telephone game. Okay, we're talking about something a million times more complex than the telephone game.
Yeah.
So some other mind is what's carrying this out, and it's communicating with and utilizing these human proxies, these archontified people that we see on our TVs all the time now.
And I think it's if people can grasp, like, just by way of trying to help sort of understand the dynamic. I mean, if you look at a belief as a mind parasite, a belief as an entity that exists psychically, like a thought form, we all propagate these beliefs, and then they kind of, even if you stop believing in it, there's still like a latent psychic energy that exists in the morphic field that can be tapped into again, picked up again. So humans come and go, but there's always that sort of that energy lurking in the background, or that demiurgic kind of force or field that is maybe waiting to be reactivated or ever active. Like we pass beliefs from generation to generation, but so it's not that
like germ theory.
Like germ theory. We infect each new generation with germ theory.
Which is still just a theory, by the way.
That's right. It's more of a conjecture and a scam.
Always be germ theory, right? About Lanka's new experiments have basically not only, for the longest time, germ theory has not been proven, but his latest experiments have disproven it.
Yeah.
Very exciting stuff.
Yeah, he's destroyed virology single-handedly.
Yeah, and it'll take it a while to play out, but I think virology is stick a fork in that one because it's done.
And it's brilliant news for humanity, because that is obviously just the linchpin of this whole scam has been that superstition.
Absolutely. I've said over and over again, I've got a little meme I created. It's the biggest enemy of humanity today isn't a virus. It isn't even those in power who act like viruses. It's the scientific fraud known as germ theory. remove that, and you take away our controller's ability to use health terrorism to control us.
Exactly. And it's such an archontic phenomenon as well, because it's a total inversion of reality. Like once
And all in your mind.
Exactly. I mean, it's absurd. This whole, these little packages of genetic material. Well, actually, they come from inside you. You made it. It's not infecting you. You created it, and outside of your body, it's absolutely inert and useless.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about that in relation to Kali the Destroyer is that I thought long and hard about how I wanted to handle this notion of germ theory and the pandemic and vaccines and everything. And given this mass brainwashing around germ theory, I realized that I actually had to allow that fiction to exist in my fiction.
Ah.
I realized that if I were to write a book that a fictional debunking or exposition of germ theory, it would literally be the entire book.
Yeah.
So I had to let that one just slide on through, but
yeah, okay.
Otherwise I would have killed my book. So when you're writing a fiction, that's a big deal. You could get away with maybe adding length and exposition to a nonfiction work, and then you're David Wilcock,
Yeah.
Joke.
Yeah. All right. Well, what else have we not covered? Have we missed anything that you feel like is germane or essential? Particularly around the book or the story it sort of speaks to?
Well, I mean, there's so much that one could talk about, but how long have we been going?
I think we've gone. Wow, we've just passed an hour.
Yeah, I mean, we're probably at a good stopping point for anyone just wanting to, think about what we said, and you can go to my website if you want me to get out that information for people who might want to read the excerpt or.
Yeah, I mean, how do people read the excerpt or make a pre-order?
Right. Yeah, and the book is coming out. I don't know when this will go live. The book is coming out on the 20th of June. So that's 2 days from now, 3 days from now. Is it 2 days? 3 days from now. So the pre-order phase will be ending then. But if you make it under the wire there, that's great. Otherwise, it'll just be for sale on the website, which is crowrising.com.
Cool.
crowrising.com. There's a page, Kali the Destroyer. You'll see how to get there. There's the pre-order, there's the excerpt, there are reviews, there are some links to some interviews I've given, and you can certainly stay busy with that. You can also sign up for my newsletter. If you do that and you share Kali online, at least for now, you can get a free copy of my last novel, which is Snooze, The Story of Awakening, a free e-copy. So that's an option.
Cool. Brilliant. All right. Well,
I just love you in your Zen space there. It's just I like the feng shui of what you got going on. The guitars are a nice touch.
Thank you.
People loved your 12 days of how the deep state stole Christmas.
Yeah, well, that was a collaborative effort between Sol and I. If you're not familiar with what Sol's referring to, we did a 12 days of how the deep state stole Christmas, and it's on BitChute, definitely. I put it up there, and YouTube as well. Yeah.
Well, mine got taken down on YouTube.
Oh wow.
Can you believe that? They took it down, though it's just pure satire.
Christmas satire at that.
Christmas satire at that, and funny and well done.
Yeah, I mean, well, they can find it on my BitChute channel, so head over there.
Yeah, it's on mine too, and I have a podcast, All Luckman Uncensored. You can find it all over the place.
Cool. All right, so well, as always, mate, it's been a pleasure chatting.
Absolutely. Maybe I can get you on my podcast one of these days.
That sounds good. I'll try and squeeze in a few minutes away from you know who.
8 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Well, thanks for having me on, and it's fun to catch up. You look really good. I've been thinking about you a lot down there with all the craziness you guys have going on. I mean, I'm in Florida, which is probably the freest place on the planet right now. So, I feel very fortunate.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So it's pretty good in Florida.
Yeah, it's pretty much back to normal in most ways, but I'm not saying that's it's going to stay that way. I know they have many plans, but we'll see where things go. We have
Yeah.
a very strong governor who's standing up to these thugs.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's really good to hear.
While most drinking water looks the same, not all water is created equal. Discover how one machine can filter, charge, and restructure regular tap water into 5 different types of water with over 60 different uses. Learn how you can nourish your body and detox your home from electrolyzed reduced water rich in molecular hydrogen and potent antioxidants for drinking to highly alkalized and oxidized waters replacing toxic cleaners and personal products in your kitchen, bathroom, and laundry. To learn more about this life-changing water, visit brendandmurphy.com/water. I've experienced censorship on no less than 4 different platforms so far, so if you'd like to help me get my work past the censors, please do subscribe and share it around for me. And also remember to join me on truth.network, which is the platform I created for our conscious community to connect and gather away from the censors after Facebook shut down our page in 2018. So head over there, create your free account at truth.network. It's TROOTH, and I'll see you inside. Take care.